let me join you, and I'm very glad. Right? Thank you so much.
No, it's very nice of you to come because obviously Tat is busy, so this is the only time you get to meet him.
That's right.
No, I think we would have met a lot more frequently. Teru and I mean, he comes to Singapore frequently, and in the days before COVID, I would be very happy to pop by Tokyo and just, if nothing more, just to spend some time together, right?
Well, unfortunately, what happened with COVID is that I'm stuck in Tokyo, as you can see. But we remain connected, right?
Yes,
That's the main thing.
that's right.
But how do you stay connected? Tat never has time. He's always such a busy man. I asked him to send some pictures. I still haven't got them. When are we going to see those? You're going to send it to me, or you're going to put them up?
Well, when it's appropriate and when you think it's timely, I would just put it up. Some of them are really, family pictures and stuff which I think Turo himself wouldn't have seen. Hey, Adi, hi.
Hi, Adi.
Hi, Tat. Hi, Vikram. How are you?
How are you? Hi, Kathleen.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good evening.
The thing with that, the thing is, to keep it a good Singapore time, Kathleen has to get up at 5 o'clock. What is it, 5 o'clock there?
Yeah.
Wow.
Look, this is the enthusiasm. Imagine the enthusiasm here.
I'm excited to hear your story.
We all are. Hi, Brian.
Hi, how are you?
You met Tat before? Have you?
I haven't met anybody before.
You haven't?
No.
Now, is that a general statement of life, or is it only for this
No,
show?
no. I'm not a hermit. I have met other people, but I haven't met anybody in this group.
Okay, that's okay. Because I can take you around, but I think we can do it after the event. We can go through what. Yeah, we would normally. What we normally do is we will go through Tat's story and everything, and we'll all come back. We'll get to know each other after that. What do you think, Tat? That's okay, Tat?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that it will be great to hear from everyone, because I think my story is actually a non-story. I mean, when you, Vikram, first asked me, my first reaction is actually there's not much to tell. Actually, it'll be all over in 5 minutes, literally.
That's what you think, Dad. When we get into it, lots will come out, which we need. Look, the purpose behind it. You know what the purpose is. Purpose is that people should be able to relate to your story. We want mediators out there, and they're already there. They're all out there. So let them identify with you, and to be able to then tell themselves we are mediators and we have it in us. Whatever. Not that we can become a mediator kind of thing, because the millions that we need, that's the only way to go about it. The way I'm looking at it is one of those steps. Then after that, obviously, other things will happen. So why don't you just meet everyone here? We'll be comfortable. It's like sitting in my drawing room. Like I told you, it'll be like sitting in my drawing room talking. So there's Gunawati is in Malaysia.
Hi.
You haven't met Tat, is it?
No, but I've had the benefit of listening to Tat when he was the mediator for the Alsa Moods final.
Oh, wow.
I was one of the judges for the semi-finals. You were the mediator for
Okay, Tat, now the situation is Malaysia is right next door. On the other end, we have Jimena from Chile.
Hello.
Hi. Hello, Vikram. Hi, Tat. I haven't met you before, so
I know, but just looking at your background, I would sort of exchange places with you in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Yeah, we're ending our summer, but it's a really nice temperature here.
Oh,
although it's 9 o'clock in the morning, but it's a really nice weather.
It looks like a very nice 9 o'clock thing that you're having there.
Sure.
Okay, then we have Ambassador Chuck. Chuck was ambassador of Israel to various places. So,
hello, Ambassador. Hi.
Hi, I'm just Chuck, not ambassador.
We can see that. We can see that in your name. You put the ambassador first, and then you tell.
That's my standard. You want me to? You're gonna make me rename myself. I'll rename myself.
If you say you're not the ambassador, then you have to take it out from the name. What is it? I'm not the ambassador, but I want to put that first. Like I put mediator first.
Yeah, the truth is when I pick up the phone, if somebody says Mr. Ambassador, then I know it's somebody who doesn't really know me. So that's easy enough,
Okay, but then Adi, Adi everyone knows.
Of course, yeah.
and Kathleen is sitting in Texas. Actually, like Jagdeep and Nicholas are in Australia. And anyone else from Australia? No. Then Indrani is in South Africa, in Durban. Ilan is actually from the UK, but I think he's still in Como. He's been enjoying Como and he's stuck around there. And then we have Lisa is in the US. She's in Cincinnati.
Wow. Okay.
Fernanda is in Brazil.
Yes.
Bob is in the N. Alfred Hitchcock movie somewhere. he's in the UK. And anyone else I've missed out? James is there. James
is in Kobe. Are you still in Kobe, James? Or maybe not?
Yeah, could be. But I think he's logged in and he'll come back, I think.
Yeah.
Migle, how do you pronounce that? Migle?
It's Migle.
Migle, you please tell us where you are. Where are you?
I'm actually calling in from Vilnius, Lithuania. Pleased to meet you.
So I've done that basic introduction, so you know who's who. So basically now, Tat, you have to take us. What I can do is let me just mute all of you and let Tat unmute himself, and then we get back to all of you after that. 1 sec. Yeah, Tat. Now you can.
Okay.
Yeah. So Tat, you have to take us to the Singapore that you grew up in, because everyone obviously looks at the Singapore today, but definitely is a very different place at that time.
Take you through Singapore. Actually, I think Singapore is such a small place, and it's so accessible in terms of well, pre-COVID, of course, it's very accessible. But if one looks at getting pictures of Singapore on the internet, you see all of it. What maybe might be helpful is to kind of show you some pictures of what it looked like when I was growing up.
Exactly. That's the one that we have to see.
Okay, so let's see how this works, okay? Here we go.
Okay, so basically you wanted to do the whole presentation. That is, you're so used to all these presentations.
So you're right. It's like a force of habit. So
yeah,
if you ask me to put pictures together, I kind of just put them on things like this, right? It's what the heck,
You want to show us how professional you are. That is what.
It's amateurish, but it does give you a sense of some backdrop. So this picture, I mean, there's 3 pictures of many pictures. Kind of shows you like what a noob I was growing up, right? So I mean, noob is actually, by the way, a term which my kids use to express someone who's like a little bit nerdy. On the left picture, you see that lady dressed in white. That's my mom. When I was growing up, I was like petrified of her, because she would be the one who tells me you got to do your homework. And she kind of teaches me my second language as well, which is Chinese. And if you don't do anything by her rules, out comes the rotan, and you get a whack, every time you do something wrong. So maybe that's why she's sort of holding on to me that way. But where we were sitting, it's a Sunday, and we were out in the Botanic Gardens. The picture at the small one at the bottom, I have 2 elder brothers. That's my second brother, who is 5 years older than me. And he's always been sort of a music enthusiast. And I remember even when I was young, growing up, there's always music in the house, and he'd spend all his money buying records and then playing music.
But what kind of music was it?
Well, he listens to all sorts, but it's mainly pop music. But he has, he listens to both the Asian pop scene, both the Chinese music, as well as in those days, Japanese pop was coming on stream. But currently his job for the longest time has been to do performing arts management. So I still hear a lot of that coming from him.
But how much older is he?
Oh, he's 5 years older than me.
Okay.
And then I have another eldest brother who is 9 years older, and I used to always tell people that he inherited all the intelligent genes, because he's the guy who goes to do like aeronautical engineering and goes to MIT. And my second brother and I we just do our local uni, and do what we need to do with the rest of the genes that we have left.
Okay, so something is put there so that you had to aspire to do something there.
Okay, this next picture, right? So it's growing up years now. And those of you who are familiar with, Singapore landscape, you know that in my time, we spent 2.5 years doing national service. Nowadays, it's been reduced to 2 years.
But what age do you go for that?
Sorry?
What age do you go for that?
18 years old. So right after we finish our A-levels, you get sort of shipped into the military, and then you spend 2.5 years. You come out 2 years behind the girls in terms of university. Mm-hmm. So the cohort you're placed in would have ladies who are 2 years younger than you, pretty much.
Okay. But it's a good thing. I mean, in terms of discipline and everything, I'm sure it's a good training.
I think it's an excellent thing. I mean, after you've been through, I can say that, right? But going through wasn't all that fun. But it's a great thing for a small country. It's one of the, I think, pivotal public policy initiatives that's worked out very, very well for social integration. So that in Singapore, by and large, most of us are very cognizant of racial harmony. And I think that when you look around the small city state that we have, I would say overwhelming majority understands the need for national service, understands the need for racial integration, understands the need for even social engineering. If you go internet, you'll hear Prime Minister talking about how even for housing development flats, public flats, there's a quota that needs to be satisfied in different racial groups. And
it's a mixed community, so it's a mixed community that you have to live in. You have to, in a way,
right? Yeah. But this is enforced, and I know that many Western politicians will say, well, that sounds like one of those, overbearing policies which Singapore is known for or infamous for. But I mean, I think that you will not hear many complain in Singapore.
No, but I think that means when you were growing up itself, the communities were mixed right from then.
Yeah.
Since the time you remember, or you were always growing up with people from all over.
And so I didn't realize, of course, that the world was so much different, because growing up, I had friends who were Indians, who were Malays, who was of different races, and you've always regarded each other as part and parcel of your community.
No, but that kind of mixed Singapore that we see now, at that time, I'm sure it wasn't like you didn't have nationalities from all over and that kind. I'm sure it wasn't that mixed, was it?
It's always been, when you think about Singaporeans, it's always going to be, at least for the first and second generation Singaporeans, it's always going to be about 60, 70% Chinese. Mm-hmm. And then another, maybe 15, 20% Malays, and then Indians and as well as the Eurasians, among that mix.
Okay.
But this is one of those pieces where I think depending on who you talk to, it could occupy a lot of discussion points, because if you speak to an American, I think they will have very strong views about how this policy isn't exactly one that fits the Western sense of what democracy should look like, right?
That's okay. I'm sure everyone has to experiment with it. I mean, you're a country that is, it's just about growing at that stage. So I'm sure there have to be experiments to be done.
Yeah.
What works out, doesn't work out. That's a long-term kind of thing. The effects come up after maybe 50 years or something. So that's okay.
So here we go. Growing up and finally having kids of my own.
Aren't we going too fast? Aren't we going too fast?
Can't
be. We just got into the army. We just about got there, and now we're straight away here. I'm sure there is lots that's happened between.
So in between that period, look, there were these pictures and photographs, and it really, to curate these pictures, it just takes too much time. So I'm kind of just hopping around a little bit, but I love this picture because it was a period where my kids were growing up and they were really young. So that's my daughter. She's the youngest of the 3 kids I have. And when they're this young, it's so rich, right? I mean, what they add to your life.
But this is what's her name?
Pamela.
Pamela. And how old is she now?
Oh, she's 20 years old.
Okay. So that's
and
like
there's a
we're talking.
side story to the picture, which I think a lot of you who are parents will understand immediately when I tell you. So there was this trip, right, that my wife said, I'm not free today. She says, you've got to accompany Pam for this trip together with her kindergarten friends. And my wife tells me, this is like a duck and hippo tour. So I thought, oh, we're going to the zoo, right? So Singapore is always hot, right? It's like 35 C upwards. So I'm dressed, and then I thought, well, okay, it's going to be a hot day. And then I was with her in the initial stage, and I realized that this duck and hippo tour is not about the zoo. It's just a trip called the Duck and Hippo Tour, where you get on this vehicle that looks like a duck, duck-shaped vehicle, and then it just brings you around different places in Singapore.
Oh, but this is the one that goes into the water and then it drives out. That's the one it is?
Yeah, it goes into the river as well. For some of you who've been on this tour. And I'm not sure, Tyrone may have a story on this. I'm not sure whether he's ever taken this tour, but some of you who come to Singapore will know there's this duck and hippo tour that's sort of run for tourists mainly. But this was a time where the kindergarten school organized this for the kids. So there I was with her.
How did it work out? She was happy at the end of it?
Well, it worked out very well when I realized I didn't have to trudge around the zoo. All I had to do is bring her up on the bus, sit down, and enjoy the ride. That's.
But was she also looking forward to a zoo, or she knew what it was all about?
Oh no! I think she was much more cued in than I was. I was just accompanying her, and she realized totally what it was all about.
It must be quite an interesting thing. I haven't actually sat in that, but it must be interesting to have that vehicle get into the water, get out.
It was, right? Yeah, it is. I think not many tourists nowadays, of course, in Singapore, but I guess when it all comes back. This is where they are right now. You asked how old they are, so that the young girl.
This is like 15 years of life. 15 years of life. You've gone with one click.
I know, right?
It's not going to happen, Tad. We're going to go back. This is like your presentation. Then I'll start after that.
Okay, well, I'll let you take the lead.
Okay, no, tell us the names first of all. You have to know their name, your wife's name, your kid's name.
So my wife, her name is Angeline. And then the chap on the right side, he's the eldest, Jeremy. And then Pam I've mentioned, and the boy who's seated right in front, he's Oliver, who's 21 years old this year.
Not bad. And the other one, the youngest, the smallest one in the family?
The smallest one, are you referring to the dog?
You can't call it a dog. Come on, how do you call your kid a dog? That's like, don't do that.
That's Theo, who's seated on Ollie.
Well, what breed is it?
It's a Shetland sheepdog.
Mm-hmm. But does it get too hot for? Must be getting too hot for it in Singapore.
You've got to give him air conditioning, I suppose, and make sure that you bring him out for walks only evening. But I've got a better picture of this dog. So if you don't mind, I'm going to skip to.
Look, either if your kids ever listen to this, they're not going to like you saying dog at all. I'm sure.
Well, he is a dog after all. That's him.
Wow. Okay. And he's a dog, just a dog. You say. He's like.
So, but this is a real picture. So it's not been photoshopped. Okay. So
seriously,
that's him. And we thought that he might look pretty good in a pair of sunglasses, and we put this on him, and he just like.
So I think now why are you saying dog? Because that's the coolest member of the family, and you don't want to acknowledge that.
I'm sure that my family would disagree with you, Vikram, if you say that's the coolest member of the family.
Look at that! Look at the attitude.
Yeah, so that's where we are, and this is the kitchen area. You can see that he's got a. Look, I don't think anyone want to hear my dog stories, right?
Why not?
I'm actually not sure what angle you want to talk about.
No, we have to go. Look, basically, what you're going to go back now. Okay, you've done your presentation. Now we have to go back to you growing up, and then go back to your mother and the situation. Then, what was it like? That relationship. Well, that is what we're getting into. This is like just a.
I have a couple more pictures, but I reckon I'm going to let you take the lead, Vikram, because some of the other pictures are, after I've started practice and
We'll
some
come
of
back to
the-
we'll come
okay.
back to that. We'll come back. Look, time is not an issue at all. So you have enough time. But what tell me? I mean, when you're growing up now, the relationship with your mother and her being so strict with you, definitely a major influence.
Yeah, but that's not unusual in an Asian family in my time, that you have parents who are very strict. My father was very relaxed about things, but my mom, was like, wow, if you don't come back with good results, you get those kinds of capital punishment that nowadays might qualify as something for a child to seek personal protection orders.
Okay, but maybe look, has it worked out good for you? It's worked out well for you.
I think there's a part of that that's been very helpful because it makes you respectful, right? A part of that not so good, I think, because you don't get close to. I find myself not being as close to my mother because there's always this persona of someone who's a disciplinarian, very strict. Someone who, when I think of her, I think of not in a particularly sort of fuzzy, lovey way, but more someone who looked after me and who disciplined me when I was growing up.
No, but when you look back, I'm sure you would say that her intentions were good and she was doing it for you. I think at this point of time,
all that. I think no issues with all that, but I think that itself is a very Asian thing and maybe a very Chinese thing that you accept that that's how it's going to work and no complaints. But having gone around and listened to other folks growing up years, I think there's a piece of that relationship that's missing. Because you think of your mom and your dad, you like to be able also to think of the rich moments where you feel really connected to your parents, right? So for that, I'm not alone in this, but I think that piece is very much missing in the growing up years.
but you were doing your family holidays and all those kind of things.
I'm sorry?
You're doing your family holidays and everything
Well, in those days, I would say my family could be described growing up as an upper middle class family. But trips were pretty much to just Malaysia and nearby places, which is great in itself, but it wasn't a regular thing. I mean, it's not like every year, you expect to have a trip or family vacation.
But then how does the family bond in terms? I mean, we're sitting together at dinner time, talking about things. What was really happening?
So how would I describe this? I think that I think mine is probably an extension of what it really looks like for a Chinese family that has extended family members. So growing up in a house, I had not just my parents with me and of course both my brothers, but I also had my uncle, who's my father's brother, and his family. And I had grandmothers from my grandfather's side. So in those days, polygamy was not outlawed. So my grandfather had 3 wives, and all of us lived together in the same house.
So how many children grew up together?
And all the children grew up together. But sorry, how many children?
Yep. How many children?
Well, in my house there were 15 people.
Okay.
Well, it's not extraordinarily big. But you do expect that there's a lot of give and take.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting place. I mean, I'm sure it's an interesting kind of an upbringing because you have so many people out there whom you can maybe talk to, relate to, everything. I'm sure it must be interesting.
A piece of what you just said doesn't resonate with me. It's not like you have an environment where you can get home and you start sharing about how life has been in school or in your national service. We don't do things like that. It's not a family environment where you get home and people actually listen to you. My mom and my dad were always busy with the work and back home there's lots of things and chores to do. So in today's environment, I think if you had parents that way, I think you would probably feel as though there's a big part of your life that's missing. But in those days, I would say a lot of parents are like that, at least in the Asian side of the family in Singapore.
But the parents are here only in Singapore now?
Well, my dad's passed on, and my mom is still around. But she's what, born 1930. She's actually 81, 82, 81 this year.
But she's living on her own.
No, she's living in a place near my brother. You know, it's a small city that we have, and we take turns visiting her.
Okay, but she's active, doing her.
My mom is not active right now.
No?
I mean, I think she's become she's suffering from some bit of dementia, and so pretty much spends her day, you know, just doing simple things.
Yeah, but that must be a tough thing to look at when you say, because I haven't seen that happening, but I can understand that seeing someone in dementia must be it's quite serious to see someone in that condition, not even knowing who they are, kind of thing.
Yeah, well, there are days when she knows what's going on, and there are days where she would not know who the grandchildren are.
Yeah, must be sad. Yeah, it is sad. But what about the other people in the family? I mean, all these other uncles and everything. Now everyone has obviously gone into their own houses and those.
Yeah, everyone. I think we reached a point in our journey together where everyone went their separate ways. In the mid-1980s, when I was in national service in the army, I think that's the stage where my uncles decided that, you know, everyone's going to move apart, you know, and so this house that we were living, people just moved elsewhere, and the house was sold, and my parents moved to a place where they lived together with myself and my second brother.
But where was the first house? Which part of Singapore?
Oh, very much central in River Valley Road.
Okay.
That's very near Orchard Road. I mean,
Yeah,
I think everyone knows where Orchard Road is, so that's like a stone throw away from Orchard Road.
And I know from Clarke Quay, you go onto the River Valley Road.
Yeah, I know you are an expert, Vikram.
No, I've spent time there, so I know where that is. But otherwise, then after that, you moved into what part? I'm just trying to figure out the Singapore that you live in. I just trying to get an idea there.
I've always lived in the city area, so growing up for me was, you know, I'm so used to being able to walk down to Orchard Road.
That's a good part about Singapore, the walking there.
Yeah, and you might say that my experiences maybe differ significantly from the majority of Singaporeans in those days, because you'd have the majority of Singaporeans actually living in public housing, whereas my family and extended family lived in like a private house, very central, in the central part of the city.
Yeah, that's a nice part about Singapore, that just in that area walking around, definitely nice. But then what the relationship with your siblings? What was that?
Well, I'm going to answer this question that's put on the chat, what my parents did for work. My father and my mom worked in a family-related company. They do import-export work. My father was in charge of like the shipping department, and it's not big deal shipping. He just handles the import-export work. My mother does like part of she was in the accounting department. She does the finance part of it. But in a way, it was a family-run business. So it was comfortable, but nobody gets rich except the shareholders. And growing up, I don't think they needed to work very hard, but neither was the pay very high. Yeah, but we were comfortable where we were.
But the needs were less, I'm sure, at that time.
Sorry, the needs?
Needs were less, I'm sure, is kind of...
Yeah.
Did that materialism, had it already come there, or that came in later?
In the 1970s, when I started primary school, here's a gauge for some of us who are used to the currency, right? I mean, I could get a bowl of noodles for 10 cents Singapore. That was in the early 1970s.
And now, how much is it?
Well, I think if you go to a hawker center, say you go to Newton Food Court or Food Center, your bowl of noodles would easily cost at least $2, $3 Singapore dollars.
That's still not too bad. That's not too bad.
That's very good.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, given how far we've come from the 1970s. Because I'm looking around and I know that, like, you know, looking at Turo and saying, you know, the ramen in Tokyo is just you really have to bring some money, serious money along when you're going for a meal in Tokyo.
I think why not unmute him? Yes. One sec. Yeah, Kato, you can unmute yourself. And you can tell us. Sorry. Yeah. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yep.
Yep.
I'm not really an expert on ramen, but I know Tat was keen, and his wife was also keen with ramen. So when they come to Tokyo, it's a sort of duty for me to take them to ramen places. Yeah. And the good thing is, of course, he brings a big purse, big wallets from Singapore.
Yes,
so I don't have to worry about that.
So that is what it's all about. Now I think you'll have to come and holiday in India after that.
Part of me for today, Vikram, I wanted to show pictures not of people or family or what. I wanted to show everyone the cuisine we have in Singapore, so that when COVID is all done and over with, everyone in this chat group in this Zoom should come across to Singapore and when you get here, I'm going to bring you out and we're going to have a feast. And Turo is nodding because he's been here a few times and is always eating, So if you come here, you're just going to feast with me. And after that, you gain a couple of extra kg and that's all good.
So that we are going to go through that. But first we're going to go down into your relationship with your siblings.
Okay. Two brothers, and because of the age gap, my eldest brother and me, I've always regarded him as someone to look up to. I mentioned earlier that he paved the way. He was, I believe, probably the most accomplished student in my family. And looking at how he pressed on in his studies was, in a way, an inspiration, but also very daunting. Because my second brother is very different. My second brother wasn't as studious as he was. And he certainly had interests which were more holistic, less studious, but he dabbled with like music and went out to like concerts and stuff like that, which my eldest brother didn't quite do. So I was kind of like the in-between. I remember at the age of about 6 or 7, I was given a choice. So my eldest brother went to a Catholic school that spoke Chinese as a first language. My second brother went to a mission school that spoke English as a first language. And my mom asked me, which would I choose? Because, it's easier when you have a brother in school for you to get into that school. At that sort of young age, I had no clue, but I remember my second brother reaching out to me and saying, don't go to Catholic high school, because actually if you come to this school that he was in, it's a mission school, he said, you don't have to study. So, I didn't have to think twice when someone tells you, my second brother says, don't have to study. That to me was like the choice, that was the criteria.
Easy choice. No, but tell me something, Tat. You keep saying Chinese. Now, what are we talking about? Mandarin, Cantonese? What are we talking about? Mandarin, is it?
So when I say Chinese, I mean, of course, the spoken language carries many forms, right? In Singapore, the mainstream Chinese that you speak would be Mandarin, right? But of course, the written language would be the same as for different dialectal groups. I speak, growing up at home, I speak a Chinese dialect called Teochew, which is very different from Mandarin. So, if some of you who know Mandarin would know, say, if I greeted you and say, good morning, I would say, 早上好, right? That's Mandarin, 早上好. But if I said this in dialect, it would sound very different. It sound more like, in fact, we don't say good morning. We would say, how are you? It would sound like, lu hao mo, how are you? Lu hao mo. So that sounds very different. But I grew up with my grandmother speaking to us children in the Teochew dialect. So we kind of got used to that. But if you look at my children today, all three of them cannot speak a single word of my dialect.
That's sad. And one dialect gone from the family. That's sad. One dialect
I know,
gone.
Right? But this is the effect, I think, of growing up Singapore. when you look at the younger, like the millennial generation in Singapore, you find that they are English speaking or Mandarin speaking, depending on the schools they attend. And if they are English speaking, you tend to find that their competence in spoken second language isn't very good, which is a shame because the second language tends to be their mother tongue, or should be the mother tongue.
Well, yeah, definitely. But language has a connection to culture, and then if that language goes, a lot of other things go with it, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. But on the other hand, I suppose I've listened to a lot of research on how this works, and there's a window period where you pick up languages very quickly. So I'm always in awe of folks, who grew up in Europe, and there's lots of them. I mean, I'm sure Adi can speak like 1,000 languages, but I actually find myself finding it very hard to speak Mandarin and to relearn Mandarin, because 99% of my daily works involves just doing this. I speak this language, which is not even my mother tongue at all. But I speak English so much better than Mandarin, and that's a real shame.
Imagine suddenly now we have Heidi joining us. She has a theory in terms of mediators. What are they, middle children or the youngest? She's looking at the middle one right now. She has some, we'll come to that. She has some survey that she's going to do on this. Ooh. Do you think there's something like that? Do you think something is there on this?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to hear from Heidi, actually. I mean, these theories about growing up and, not being able to speak your mother tongue, I think really carries an effect. And of course, in Singapore, we are very pragmatic, right? And very transactional in a way. So we will say, learn the second language, especially learn Mandarin or Chinese, because that's useful in your later life when you're doing your career, advancement. Chinese market is huge, and being able to speak the language is great.
No, but we have don't you have a very large population which is only Chinese speaking?
Do we have a population that's only Chinese speaking?
Yeah, I think there's a large.
But that stems from which schools they choose when they're growing up. So if you go to a school where the medium of instruction is Chinese, or you learn Chinese at a higher level, then I think your competence is a lot more entrenched than someone who goes to a school that teaches in English and you learn Chinese haphazardly as a second language.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but now we were on your siblings. We moved away from that.
My siblings. Well,
what is it now? What is the relationship right now? Where are they right now?
Well, I think we have a much better relationship now than maybe some of the growing up years. What I mean by that is, so the interaction wasn't organic when we were growing up. You don't get those instances where you have you talk about deep things. You talk about growing up, your challenges in school or with relationships, and sharing those kinds of things with siblings. I never had that. And so my go-to people when I have problems is a group of friends, really, from school. And so that meant in many ways that I was so much closer to my closest friends in school than I was with my brothers. That relationship, of course, became much better when we were adults, and when we became when we had our own families, and then coming back, you realize that life is getting on, and there's a need to restore that relationship. So I think we're in a much better place now than we were growing up years.
But I think 5 years, 9 years at that stage definitely is a lot of age difference, because obviously you're the little one there, and they won't obviously be able to discuss a lot of things with you at that age.
That's right, but I'm going to be sure that a lot of people in this group would have siblings who are of that sort of age gap and who have grown up fabulously together.
But but what do you think well, finally it's all down to Tat Lim, the mediator. I mean, do you think that has an influence on you, that aspect of life?
I can't think of I mean, I don't think the answer can be no, right? Because you are made up of all your years of growing up, and your composition of how you think, your filter systems, the way I think is influenced by all of those.
Yeah, definitely. Of course, there'll be an addition of everything, definitely. But does this have any role to play somewhere, you think? Because we're trying to just join these threads and we have just trying to see where is there a linkage somewhere in terms of the development of a mediator, the evolution of a mediator.
So I think what has been, if I don't try and overthink this, one piece which I think would be clear is because of the way I was brought up, the sense of having a definitive outcome is never clear in my mind. So how that creeps into conversations is I find growing up, my friends would often say to me that I'm not very clear in what I was saying because I kind of, beat around the bush a lot when I talk about something. And in some ways, that's come back in a very good way because I find that when you are asking a question in mediation and you are trying to explore a subject matter, it helps when you are able to put forward an idea, but not directly. And that sort of ability, I think, was, for me at least, developed in the years when I was growing up. For example, not being able to, talk directly to my parents, but always having to go in a roundabout way if I wanted something. And then, thinking about growing up with my siblings, not having that, really deep moments where you have a heart-to-heart sort of connection. But then, being able to ease out what you want from like a distant relationship, a distant conversation.
And also the fact that you're dealing with people that much older. So in terms of your conversations also, I'm sure you had to maybe talk at that level with them. That it could be the maturity that comes in faster, maybe. Do you think that happens?
Well, I was the youngest in the family, right? So I'm not sure when I would say the turning point for me when I felt that here's when I started being independent in my views was national service, being in the army, being on your own together with other folks. Hardship, I think, matures you fairly rapidly. So when I say looking back, with tinted glasses, you think that period, 2.5 years in the army was great. Well, actually, it wasn't so great when you're in it, but the forging of your metal, I think, is often done through hardships. And I think for me, it was no different.
Yeah, I think that maybe that just the fact that you were put into a situation where you were maybe with people who were about your age and you were maybe doing things certain things which you might not have done otherwise. It could be, I don't know, could be a lot of factors.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what about your father now? What is the relationship with your father at that time?
Well, my father was a fun person. And my father was the one I go to whenever I wanted some extra pocket money. Because I wouldn't go to my mom and ask for money, right? Because she'd say, what do you want it for and why do you need so much money? Whereas if I go to my dad, more often than not, he would just dole me some extra pocket money which I could use. But as much as I say I was close to my father, I mean, the parts of our journey that I was very fond of was those moments where I had that one-on-one outings with him. So I remember Sundays, not many, but there were some Sundays that he would call me up in the morning and say, let's go and watch a morning movie on Sunday. And I it was just a handful of occasions, but I remember all those occasions. I mean, I don't deliberately remember them, but looking back, without trying too hard, I remember how I look forward to those moments, going out with just him, and then watching like a
you have to tell us. Yeah, you have to tell us which movies that you remember.
Sorry?
Which movies do you remember out of that time?
Oh, so there was this, I can't remember the name of the movie, but General Custer, there was this movie where General Custer, the battle of the little big horn, is it, or something like that?
If any man knows this movie, please raise your hand, and if someone would.
The Americans would know this for sure, right? Because this is part of their history.
Yeah. Kathleen, any idea? From Texas, you would know cowboys from Texas, I'm sure.
The battle at the little big horn, right? Something like that.
Kathleen, any idea? You can unmute yourself. You can tell us.
Hi. No, I remember the movie when I was little on black and white television, but I'm from the Boston area, so I don't know these cowboy movies.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, Kathleen, the other movie that you know, I loved watching growing up was To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh yes.
And the you know, the tune at the beginning, and then Gregory Peck, right? I mean, you know, this is very unusual in a way because you're talking about growing up, for me, Asian city, Chinese family, but English educated. So when I watched those movies, it resonated so much more with me than watching a Chinese movie. Whereas I can tell you today, that swung the other way, that I've deliberately in the last couple of years made a deliberate considered attempt to watch more Chinese movies. And I find that now resonating much better with me than the Western movies.
Yeah, because I'm sure the cultural aspect of it, growing up in a Chinese family with a joint family and all, I'm sure that culturally, obviously, you can relate to that. Relate to it more or not, I don't know, but definitely must be a nice thing to watch that. Watch the Chinese people doing the Chinese things. You need that also. No, but you're talking about your father. You were saying something. Then it was some outings and.
Yeah,
Then...
so my father, well, my father, well, apart from that, I think no different from what I described earlier, generally speaking, the relationship is one that's steeped on respect. It is really an Asian or Chinese kind of culture where the children are not heard. You don't express what you want. You just take it from the parents what they want you to do. And so that was growing up.
No, but has that carried forward into your family now?
No. So, you know, the first thing that
So basically, not Chinese anymore, Tat. Now you're not Chinese anymore.
I find that maybe it's also, you know, the influence I had growing up. I think, well, I'm very liberal in the way that I think. So you know, I would tell my children just say what they want to say, and I kind of want them to come alongside, and we are equals, except that, you know, I'm their ATM, right? Rather than, you know, asking me for permission to do this and that. So we have an open relationship, and you will find my children telling me things and being critical of sometimes, you know, how my wife and I react to them, and I welcome that actually.
No, but tell me, your friends from school, now those friends in their families is the same situation, or have they kept to the kind of Chinese or whatever culture that they?
Well, again, you know, I think it's really a whole tapestry of different kinds of people, and it's very hard to stereotype, especially a Singaporean, and say what would a typical Singaporean look like. I think you would have to say, in my case, what would a typical English educated professional Singaporean look like? Because, you know, you cut through different sizes of society, you get a different answer.
Okay. So I'm saying, well, is it a generational thing that because you've grown up in a certain kind of atmosphere, then you with your children and all, you're creating a different atmosphere there, or is it a cultural thing which with some people would continue?
I think it's a very personal thing. I just didn't think that I wanted to recreate a kind of relationship where I wasn't close to my parents at all. And there was a kind of distance. I'll relate to you this story just to let it sink home what that meant to me growing up. So I remember when I was in, you know, doing national service, and I remember, you know, one time during Mother's Day, I thought, wouldn't it be nice to buy some flowers for my mom, right? Mother's Day and all that. So I went to a shop near my home. I bought some flowers. I remember walking home feeling very embarrassed because, you know, clutching onto a bunch of flowers. I reached home, I gave her the flowers, and it's very awkward because, you know, we don't say this kind of like, I love you, mom, and we don't say that kind of thing. So I gave her the flowers, and she took the flowers. There wasn't like any like hug and all that. No, she took the flowers, put it in a pot, and that was it. And I remember thinking to myself, that is so unsatisfactory an experience that I don't want to do it again. I never did it again.
No, but
yeah, and just growing up and having kids, and I'm thinking, you know, that's not the way I wanna have a relationship, you know, with my children. I want my children to want to do things with me and my wife, to say things even if they hurt, but to be very open with, their challenges and, for us to walk together this journey.
No, but if you look back now, look at it from your mother's perspective, why do you think that it's just again a cultural thing that was, or what was it?
I think I know why. I mean, it wasn't easy growing up for my parents. My mom, let's just focus on my mother, right? It was an arranged marriage. It wasn't love, right? So arranged marriage. She married into a family where the women were supposed to take care of the housekeeping, the cooking, the washing, all of that. So, if you imagine just one example, if we're having dinner, she would have to cook under the supervision of her mother-in-law, my grandmother. And my grandmother's not an easy lady, right, to think about. So she's going to be domineering and all that. So she cooks, puts on the table, we eat, and guess what? When we are finished eating, we disappear from the table because we are boys. And she would have to clear the entire table, wipe the table, wash the dishes. No washing, dishwashing machine, all of that. It's all hand done. And when all that's done, she's not done yet because she then have to iron the clothes, wash the clothes, iron our clothes. When that's all done, she's going to have to come upstairs and make sure that she cleans the room, all of that. And that's the women's role.
That's a tough life, yeah. No, but what age was she when she got married?
20 plus.
Okay. But the parents were in Singapore. They did not come in later.
My grandparents were first generation Singaporeans. So they all came from China.
Okay.
Mm.
So basically everything happened in Singapore.
So it's tough. And I don't, how can you possibly blame your parents for this, right? I mean, I think they had a difficult life. And it was true, I think, their sacrifices. I mean, I'm not just being nice saying this, that they could have just let us rot, say, whatever, right? Do what you want to do. But I think they were disciplined so that they saw that as the pathway towards, all of us getting a better life for ourselves. So, I mean, how can you blame your parents for that? I certainly think that they've done well.
But did you ever speak to your mother about this? All what she went through?
You let it pass, but, and I can tell you, even in the later years, even though my mother became more relaxed about these things, part of me thinks that once you're past a certain timeline in your lives, it's very hard to revisit those moments.
But just the fact that if you could talk about it, at least in the sense, at least understanding her perspective.
My brothers and I talk about this in a joking way. I mean, we all revisit those moments back then. We say, remember mom was like that, and she's still like that today. But it's just between us as siblings.
So basically a tough woman growing up in a tough situation and handling all the tough things on her own.
I say it's tough, but I'm very mindful that as tough goes, look, it's nothing compared to some of us who have gone through even harsher conditions. I think of friends of ours who have grown up in war-torn cities or countries, and I think, what am I talking about? What I've experienced is nothing compared to all of that. So I hesitate to say it's tough because really, it's just...
Yeah, if you look at it relatively, definitely in that scale, it will not be there. But tough still I'm just looking from her perspective. I'm just looking at from her perspective, definitely trying to make everything go, get these children good education and have that aspiration for them. Tough, I'm sure. But everyone else, anyone who wants to ask that anything, just put your virtual hand up. You can definitely ask.
Well, while you're, shall I show a couple more pictures?
Yeah, please.
Because pictures I think are always a good way to just. So here from Theo with the sunglasses, the next picture would be moving onwards to. Really jumping on to what's been dominating my life for the last couple of years. And this talk, part of this is really about the musings of someone who's, I feel that I'm a very ordinary practitioner. I don't feel my story has really is very much worth saying, but I would say the people I've associated myself with are extraordinary. Starting with the relationships I've developed in the IBA, the mediation committee of the IBA, lovely people, also generous with always wanting to share their moments with me. And this is one of the meetings we've had where we're just sharing a meal. Lots of meals that we've had, all lovely people.
But where is that? Where is that meal happening? Which place is that?
So I think this was in Rome.
Okay.
Yeah. Here's two of my best friends in the IBA, Jill and Gary. Jill from Paris and Gary from Florida. And here we are in Montreal giving a presentation on the Singapore Convention. And those of you who have been to Singapore will know this lovely fruit, right, that we have. It's a must-have, of course, when you get to either Singapore or Malaysia, the durian.
For you, it's good. For us, it's not the easiest fruit to have.
Well, do you have that in India?
Oh, no. I've only tried it. Yeah, tried it in Singapore, but it's not the easiest fruit to have. Let me tell you that. If some people haven't had it, I'm sure you don't make it sound so nice to them because the first time they smell it, that's going to be a tough one.
And that's what Singapore Convention sort of feels like, right? It's not for everyone. Yeah. So here's some pictures again of the IBA committee at the Singapore Convention, having a great time. This other organization, the International Academy of Mediators, is where I met some of the most generous people who are so accomplished as mediators. This is Hale Abramson. All of us know his books and his publications. But, you know, the scholar in residence then at the IAM, and so generous with just, you know, putting, you know, his thoughts and views. And then, you know, when we meet, you know, there's always lots of exchanges. Another picture from IAM of someone whom I'm sure all of us know. And these are the kind of interactions that I just find so rewarding in all these organizations that I've been privileged to be part of.
Tell me, Ted, now do you get time to meet your friends from school and all those childhood
nowadays?
Friends? Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, because I would say nowadays since COVID set in, the last year or so, I've had lots of time to meet my friends from Singapore.
Mm-hmm. Good. No, but what is it like now when you compare? Now here you've got these professional relationships, and then you have those relationships. Oh, what is that like?
It's an extension of my family. I find that when I think of people I love associating with and people I love interacting with, I love spending time with folks like that. I mean, if I could sort of just spend time with so many of you who I've grown up to love so much, you know, I would in a heartbeat love to do that. So I you know, like with Adi, with Teruo, if we could, you know, meet tomorrow and you have time, I would drop, you know, whatever I'm doing just to do this.
Yep.
That's what it feels like to me.
But what about your children? I mean, your friends' children and your children have all grown up together. Is it like that?
You know what the expression empty nest egg, right? That's pretty much what it feels like right now. My wife and I, we get our moments with the children and we try and have dinner together, especially weekends. But they have their own program. My two boys have girlfriends, so you know it's a sacrifice when they come home because you know mom and dad says let's have dinner together, and I think truth be told they like to have dinner with their you know other partner.
Definitely, I mean,
yeah.
No, but we should have got them on the show. I think we should have children also here. I think that their perspective of you is also important. What you are telling us and what they'll tell you, what you tell us about your mother, maybe they'll tell us about you. Who knows what you are like for them?
You know, so here's what it would look like to them, right, Vikram? My children would think that it's weird if I brought them to like this forum.
Seriously?
What?
Look, Tat, we have to get them involved in the whole concept of mediation. So we have to be, like I've always been saying, we have to start with the children. So that whole culture of mediation, we have to get them involved at some stage. Maybe later. Okay,
yeah.
just answer Heidi. She says, just take this misconception or whatever. It's not a lychee, Heidi. Not even close to a lychee. Don't even compare it with a lychee. The durian. She wants to ask.
Very strong smell, close to jackfruit is what.
No, after that, Heidi says, "Is it a lychee?" Okay, this is a direct message. Now, Heidi, it's very, very different from a lychee. Very, very different. Tell her how different it is.
I don't know what it's like, but if I could send each of you here a version of that, I would be very delighted to do
Yes,
so.
but the customs won't let it through.
I can't send the actual durian, but the next best would be a durian sweet. And I remember going for trips and to conventions where I actually bring along a durian flavored sweet. And it's the next best because the flavor is very powerful as well. So, send me a note and I'll see if I can get something across to you that gives you a flavor of what that looks like.
That'd be nice. That'd be nice of you to send that. But
yeah, here we go. Drop me an email and I will send you something that gives you the taste of durian.
Okay, everyone, that's the nicest thing Tat has done. But I'm sure you have something to ask, Tat. No one's raised their hands. They're all, because some of them will ask you questions, which obviously will be a little more involved, which I don't want to get into right now. But Kathleen, please, I'm sure you have something to ask.
Good evening.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your parts of your story with us. I'm fascinated with how easygoing and friendly and open that you are. And I want to tell you that I know a little bit of Singapore. I attended the CME conference virtually with my law students as a coach.
Wow.
It was very well run, very big and very organized. And
Kathleen, we want some questions for Tat in terms of some personal things, something like that. As evolution as a mediator, we don't want the evolution of Singapore. We've seen that evolution.
Do you think that your international exposure that you have, which is very beautiful, by the way, do you think that comes from living with 15 people and always having a big crowd around you, and you kind of sought that out, or did that just happen to you?
No, I think it's a result of I started life as a practicing lawyer. I started life as a litigation lawyer, and after 15 years in practice, an opportunity came along for me to take a mediation course back home, and that to me was a wonderful turning point because it opened up just so many things, many thoughts, and many pathways to this great exploration that I'm still embarking today, and that really was the turning point. So it was a professional practice that led me there, and from there it's springboard me to a whole new world altogether.
But Ken was also saying the same thing. He was also exposed to this through a training. But when we look back, don't you say that you were always like that? You say that, or you don't say that? Or do you think you consciously had to look into mediation and look at things differently? Or were you just like that? Were you a mediator?
I consciously realized when I was growing up in law school that I wanted to be a court lawyer. I thought I did. And it was interesting that when I started practice and attended court, I remember thinking to myself that a piece of that was very uncomfortable to me because it was all or nothing, right? It's always a binary because you are there and you need to fight for your end of the table to win. A couple of years after I started practice, I remember coming out and feeling extremely disconcerted because there I was in the midst of arguing and always feeling that the other side isn't saying something that wasn't unreasonable. And so you know how these things go, that if you are going to litigation, especially trial, you need to compress or silence that part of you that's trying to be reasonable because you need to go to your end of the corner and make sure that you suppress the views from the other side and you prevail. You need to do that. It wasn't long after that I took the similar equivalent of a Thomas Kilmann instrument and realized that I wasn't by default assertive. I was by default very collaborative and very avoidance. I was very high on avoidance. And that really opened my eyes towards a role playing in the years after assertive role. So I find myself today having a wider spectrum, being able to be very assertive. So hazards of the profession, right? I meet a lot of lawyers who are so assertive. And when I'm in those moments, I just press a button, I get all triggered and I can be in that corner, right? Slugging out. But I'm more organic when it's in the other corner where I find myself wanting to reach out to the other side and saying, why don't we sit down and just unpack this together?
But I like that if you take this whole thing and you look at school and you being in school, how was that? I mean, in terms of the attitude towards things, being collaborative and everything, being assertive, all that. When you look at school, what was it like there?
My school?
Yeah, in terms of same things, in terms of the same feelings that you have in terms of being collaborative and a certain aspect of being assertive. But if you look at yourself in school, what were you like there?
That's my personality. My personality is I'm pretty much a collaborative person. I'm not the kind that, I mean, I feel that even in national service, as an officer of the SAF, I don't find myself wanting to assert my authority on others. I find that I'm always the kind that prefers to convince people why they should do certain things.
No, but I'm just thinking, but did you play a sport in school?
I did, but you know, it's a very strange sport. Actually, I would say this to you. I was a gymnast in school.
Not bad.
No, and you should say not good because I wasn't very good at it.
How tall were you in school?
Well, I mean, how tall was I? Is it? I'm 1.73.
Oh, and when you were growing up, I mean, look, we know Kathleen. She was 5'8" when she was what old? How old were you, Kathleen, at that time?
I was 13. I was a
13,
giant.
she was 5'8". At 5'8", and so I'm just thinking, but being a gymnast, at what height were you at that time?
I probably was about, you know, I stopped growing in I would imagine junior college, 18 years old. So I would probably be all of 1.6 there around.
Kathleen, is there a thread here? Are we talking about height not increasing
I think
over
one
time?
of the mediator mindsets is doing chores, having a disciplined life as well, raising chickens.
Oh,
Tat,
chicken! Yes. Tat, where are the chicken? We haven't had the chicken yet. Where are the chicken in your life? We have to know about the
chickens. You mean like growing up, where would I find chicken? Well, I have a chicken story to tell you if you want.
Yes, exactly. We need that. That one we need. That seems to be a common thing. Yeah.
So let's go back then to a time where I was still in growing up, say maybe 7, 8 years old. And in those days, the leftover food goes into a container, and there would be this man who would come on a weekly basis to collect this leftover food because he brings it back to feed his farm, the pigs and the farm animals.
Chicken, say chicken somewhere. You have to say chicken.
He doesn't pay us for this leftover food, but every once in a year, during Chinese New Year, he would bring over chicken. That's his payment for a year's supply of food for
at least we've got the chicken somewhere. This is what I was wondering. There was no chicken in the entire story anywhere. Okay, so there is.
This chicken story doesn't have a good ending for the chicken, Vikram.
What are you talking about? The good ending? I don't know, because the thing is that you won't find time. You didn't go through the episode with Kathleen. She actually had these chickens she was playing in the morning, and in the afternoon she was cutting them and eating them. So they was growing in a farm with her.
Okay.
Those chicken I can think of their situation. Here they thought they had a friend in Kathleen, and suddenly the next day she's gone cut. That's the end of the chicken.
Pat, when you went to your mediator course, did you find people talking the same way that you had been talking growing up? Did you find a common way of communicating as opposed to not being understood when you were talking? Because I experienced the same thing. I was always like, how come no one understands me when I'm trying to say? It's perfectly clear. Was it better when you took the mediation course?
Yeah, but I've taken quite a number of those courses, and the ones that I find really interesting is when you do it overseas and you're away from your dominant culture. So one of the first couple of courses I took was the Cedar course, and I did that in Hong Kong. And you would kind of think the Hong Kong environment is very similar to the Singapore environment, but actually there are some nuances which are totally different. And so when I say certain things, they would not immediately recognize the context of what I'm saying, which is very interesting, because if you look at all of us, we are all Chinese, but the Hong Kongers would understand certain nuances because they grew up in a Cantonese environment, and they speak certain way, and I would not be able to speak Cantonese to save my life, right? But it's a little bit like how it would be like, Kathleen, when I first started having these courses, taking these courses in the US environment, the West Coast environment, I remember sitting in a class in Pepperdine, and the speaker would be talking about, hit it out of the ballpark, for example, and I would say, what the heck are you talking about, But all the Americans were like, yeah, of course, everyone knows what the context and that all these metaphors, which are so rich in the American culture, but if you're not in it, if you don't play baseball, it's just lost.
I think that's what happens when you're growing up in a certain place. You know certain things. But Kapil wanted to ask you something. Kapil, obviously, he's a legal counsel in Autodesk. Kapil, you wanted to say something? But he's not a mediator in that sense, because we're trying to get other people involved. Yes, Kapil, what were you saying? Kapil has disappeared.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Vikram. Hi, Tat. Really appreciate you sharing your journey. Fantastic. And I've had I would say the opportunity to live and work in Singapore while I was in my earlier regional council role with IBM.
Kapil, this is about Tat, not about you.
I know, absolutely. So my question to you is, Tat, this is more on the mediation side. Now, look, resolving disputes is always, involves emotions, right? And human beings, as emotional human beings, we can't, kind of not get emotional. So my question is, in an environment, and I understand, mediation is not as contentious as a litigation, but if you can give us certain tips on, how do you keep emotions under check? And it could be, either the mediator's own emotions or the party's own emotions, because, commercial disputes, the stakes are running into millions of dollars, and, a lot of times the emotions start clouding our judgment. So I would be very interested to hear, one is obviously controlling not necessarily the party's emotions, but how do you avoid emotions clouding your judgment and not let that determine or influence the outcome?
Thanks, Kapil, for sharing that. I find myself sort of wanting to put this forward this way, that for a lot of us who grew up liking the facilitative environment of mediation, we would say at the word go that the display of emotion is a part of the communication by a party, right? The expression of how what something means to that party comes through not just verbally, but in the way the person physiologically reacts to you and communicates that to you. I find that, again, this is lots of literature would affirm this, that I don't think it really matters if something is so-called commercial, or it is a relational or family dispute, that in all of these cases where the representative shows up, there is always going to be an emotional display. What I find sometimes difficult and delicate to maneuver is that when the party is represented by counsel, the counsel are the one who are uncomfortable with the display of emotions. And I've had occasions to at least have a pre-mediation or discussion before the event with counsel, just to suggest to them that there might be moments where they would just like to allow their clients to just speak and display whatever they want to display, and let me as the mediator manage that conversation and that communication. I don't think the emotion gets in the way. I think that if you are able to facilitate and bring that into your discussion, I think it makes for a very rich communication.
Because this show, the whole idea is that relating that whole handling emotions to you as you grew up or whatever, trying to relate that there, not in terms of how you would go about doing it, but how you are doing it because of the way you grew up. Something there. Can you relate to something there?
I think it's no. Well, I would put it this way. I think for me, it's a learned skill. If you rewind the clock back to, well, I'm 57 this year. Just take me back to when I'm 15 years old. I would not be able to do this. Because, you know, I mentioned my growing up environment, we were stifled. You are not supposed to display emotions. It's a bit of the suck it up kind of mindset. But, you know, I think when one peels off this layer, I find myself very comfortable in my own skin today. So it's partly, I think, the unleashing of something which to me was very organic to how I grew up. My personality is like this, but my discovery of my ability to do this came only when I was a professional.
Maybe, but look, I mean, because the thing is, I've always wanted to push this across that you are born a mediator, and that is not something that really, it's a learned thing. So I will still go back to say, maybe you were an observer there and that came out later. Let me put it there. I have to do that. I'm giving a direction to it, but I need to give a direction to it because I do not want to take it so easy that it's a learned thing. It's not going to be that easy. But Adi, I'll just come to you, Adi. What way Shilpa wanted to say? Shilpa was wanting to ask you something, but Shilpa, not about what is happening in Singapore or whatever in terms of qualification. Please ask Tat about other things. Shilpa?
Hi.
Adi, 1 minute. Yeah.
Shilpa from India. Okay.
Hi.
First of all, I want to thank Vikram for creating this wonderful platform, and then I also thank you for coming here. Okay, so
and I haven't planted her. Okay, she's her own words. I did not tell her to say this.
Of course. Okay, but thank you. So what I want to know is, what do you think about reflections whenever you are, in a session and the session is not working, or if your session is working well? In both the cases, what do you think about the reflections? Do you think that every time you go for the mediation or before mediation, you practice on the reflective practices?
Look, how to do mediation, he will teach you later, not here. You have to ask him about his life and how his reflection point to point comes from his upbringing and his cultural thing or something like that.
Vikram, I want to know from his experience, whatever he has told me about his family and all these things.
Right. Now you have to get family into it. Then only it becomes interesting. Something you have to put that into the whole question.
Has it helped him on those reflections?
That this is it.
How do I pronounce your name?
I'm Shilpa Sharad.
Shilpa Sharad, right? Is that correct? Okay.
Shilpa.
Yeah.
Just Shilpa's good enough. Shilpa's good enough. Shilpa.
So Shilpa, so that we don't get this facilitated this way. Feel free to connect with me, and we could have another discussion.
Yes, that's the word. That's the answer I was looking for. Yes, that's the right answer.
But a quick answer, was my growing up instrumental in the way I conduct myself as a mediator today? I mean, really, look, I'm not going to be too clever about this. I'm just going to say that, I mean, obviously, growing up years would have an influence. My growing up years taught me, partly also because of my faith, that among the many traits that one must have to lead a successful life, I think humility comes up almost right on top. And I think that trait also resonates so well with mediators who are true to their profession. Humility in knowing that, if the matter settles, it's really not you, it's you play a part, but a lot of the heavy lifting is done by people who have examined the process and taught you the process, and you're mirroring what they're doing, and also the work done by the lawyers on board together with you. So, and then humility in knowing that if you do good work, it would be also the result of people who have given you that knowledge, the opportunity to grow, and all of that. And I think all of us as mediators really need to continue reminding ourselves, because I'm looking at the landscape now in Singapore and elsewhere, and finding that part of the development is really unfortunate, because we are all evolving in some ways parallel to the arbitration community, where the folks who are really doing great commercial mediation work starts to believe that, they are sort of God's gift to the mediation community. I think that's an unfortunate development, but I'll better stop there. Otherwise, I think I'll offend
take
a
that.
lot
But
of other people.
okay, so Adi is going to be asking you something, but after that, you have to tell us about your relationship with your wife, where you met her, what have that part of it we haven't got to. Adi, please.
Thank you, Vikram, and well done with a great format. Tat, wow, thank you for sharing your story. So interesting, fascinating, and it's obvious that you're a case of a great talent, but also skill, and skill we develop throughout our lives. And I think Vikram is coming from a valid standpoint. Basically, in order to be able to develop skill, we need to, we're really influenced by people around us, either professionals or family or friends, whatever. Who influenced that to become the mediator you are today? Mostly,
yeah,
I would say.
That's a very profound question. I mean, it's a simple one, Adi, but I've asked myself that question. I've never had a single mentor that I could look to and say, that's the one. That's a person I looked up to and who evolved my sort of learning over the years. I find that my answer would be that the tapestry of who I am today is made up of different champions along the way. And I could probably name a host of different people who, as in my growing up years, were instrumental in steering me one way or the other. Some steered me in a way that during that time would represent to me a very unfortunate outcome, but I learned from that. So when I say that, I mean, there were instances in my professional life where I felt that people who I looked up to didn't live up to, the way I think they should live their lives. But that also gave me a learning and steered me in a particular direction. But if you talk about names that I could throw up, they would be people, Adi, that you know. In recent years, there would be people like, for example, you and I love Judge Danny, for example. And he's one of those figures who have given all of us so many opportunities. And he steered me into understanding what it's like to be a mediator who may be very accomplished, but remains humble in the work that you want to do for your community. But there are lots of these champions in my life, and there isn't one that I could say brought me through from early days all the way to the later days.
So that means that basically there's so many other people I have to connect to get on the show. Judge Weinstein is one of them, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But I was also thinking about the family. Of course, I mean, we have our mentors, and usually there are more than one, and we receive influence from all over angles. But also in terms of our personal life, we have people that are not connected with our professional life that do, create a lot of influence for us, right?
And well, my family, all of us, my wife and my 3 kids, I think it's fair to say that we are very close knitted. We, growing up the last 15 years, we make it a point every year to spend 2 or 3 weeks together end of the year, going different places. And that's, I think, created a real sort of bond between us that, notwithstanding, the challenges of daily lives, we spend time together and enjoy each other's company. So I look at the influence which I've had from my 3 kids and their strength and what they bring to me, as well as my wife. And I could say many pieces of, again, my life reflect all that they've given me. But, that's something which I think would be true for a lot of us, but for me, certainly it's very rich.
But what have your children taught you?
That it's okay to make mistakes, that, you could come through a situation and look extremely foolish, but, it's okay. And that's who you are at the end. And I think people love you if you don't mind being vulnerable to making mistakes, to, I used to be very angsty in the early days of the profession about, creating an image of who I am. But I think now, having grown up with my children and made all the mistakes a parent could make, I think that I am so grateful to be able to work with people who don't mind that I'm not the best there is, and here are my flaws, but I'm going to be willing to do my best for you if you allow me the opportunity.
I have a question, if you allow.
Yeah, please. It doesn't have to be do anything with the practice. It has to be do with Tat himself. Yeah.
Since he has spoken about his mother, if I say that, as a child, you must have seen your mother so many times because you have got a sibling. So don't you think that your bond with being a mediator at home, mediating between the two siblings?
He was very young at that time, actually.
Yeah, I was very young. I don't think I was born I would not have been able to mediate my home as a child, but I probably grew up in that environment where I could see disputes between my eldest brother, my mom, disputes between my parents, which can get pretty robust, and finding that I'm not sure what to do about a situation like that.
Okay.
What was it like actually, in terms of the atmosphere at home?
And some would say, well, don't give what's the word to use? That's an overload of information. But growing up in a Chinese family, there are things that you would discover in when your parents pass on, when my dad passed on, that you sort of suspected in your younger days, but you realize that it's validated only when it's no longer around.
Like
that should give you a clue.
No. Like what? You no clue. I have no idea. You have to tell us. You have to tell us something, right? You have to just elaborate on it. You can't just leave it on that and just finish it off.
Yeah, but it's about relationships, right? So I mentioned that the clue is in the fact that my grandfather had 3 wives, right? And my father and mother, I think I told you, it was an arranged marriage. And there was lots of pressures on various fronts. So I think they had their own ways of, managing and finding their own release in terms of getting validation in the kind of lives that they lead.
But in terms
I see Heidi's hand being raised. So
no, we are going to come to her, because when Heidi is going to get into her theory of the middle child and the young. Yeah, please, Heidi, we were waiting for that. You came in late, but he's the youngest in the family.
Yeah, no, I did come in late, but now I'm more curious about other things. But I'll ask this first because I did miss that. Were you the youngest of 3? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, that's right.
No, but one sec, Dad. In terms of all the kids in the house, where did you stand there?
That was the youngest.
And all the others, in the uncles' kids and everyone.
Oh, I see. You mean my whoever was staying in the house? I had a cousin who was younger than me, but he was 7-8 years younger than me.
No, because I'm just saying, Heidi. Yeah, Heidi. Please.
How many people grew up in your home, like your childhood home? How many people? I'm sorry if I'm being redundant.
Oh, sure. I mentioned about 15 people were staying in that same house.
And how large was the house?
Pretty large, actually. It's a 3-story terrace house. I think in terms of square feet, if you're familiar with that calculation, it's probably in the region of maybe close to 6,000-7,000 square feet.
Okay.
But Heidi, don't expand. Heidi, don't expand your whole research. Now it's not going to be how much per square foot he had to live in. It was about
I'm trying to understand, and tell me to be quiet if you've already talked about this, because I wasn't here and I was late, and I apologize for that. But what were the circumstances of 15 people living together? Like, why was it? Was that cultural? Was that?
Yeah. So it's different nowadays, because nowadays a lot of Singaporeans live in their own small little family unit. But growing up, a lot of Singaporeans would live with their extended family, very much like China, where you have the patriarch and then so the extended family stays together under one roof.
Okay. So your mom basically moved into her
That's correct. So that's right. So my mom would move in, and it's always with the guy's side of the family, right? So
right. And what was that? Why were they in arranged marriage? Like, what was it about that coupling that was thought to be a good match?
Oh, I'm not even sure that's the right criteria. Was it a good match? I don't think my grandparents or her.
I mean, was it economic? Was it financial? Was it?
No, I think it was purely based on who my grandparents knew or know, and who they might think would be a good fit.
Okay.
Yeah, certainly, I think in my case, I don't see that the connection, the matchmaking was due to economic reasons. But because both sides of the family were quite well off.
Okay, but they felt like personality-wise or whatever that this would work.
I don't think they thought of it so deeply, you know. I think what probably occurred was that my mom was fairly well educated for a lady her time, and my dad was a bit playful, but you know he was also from a mission school, and you know I think it must have been the case that somehow or other on an occasion the seniors got together and somehow I think they must have decided in their wisdom the two of them are good for each other.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. So Vikram has alluded to the fact that I'm trying to create this survey, that I have this theory about.
Theory. Yes, you have a theory.
I have a anecdotal theory that's being dashed. I mean, because I don't even fit the stereotype that I
never say that, Heidi. Never say that. He could be the exception to prove the rule.
True.
We won't count anyone out. We'll just keep the theory going. We have enough time.
So my question was, did middle children make sort of born mediators, as Vikram has talked about? You know, are mediators born? Is the mindset born, or is it something that?
Okay, Tat and I will not agree to it. So finished. Your theory is gone. Tat, we won't agree to this. He's out. She's out. Okay, new theory. You come up with some other per square foot one theory. We'll look at that after that.
No. But just so you know, in 2 seconds, I'll just say that I don't disagree with that theory. But sometimes those skill sets that they are born with remain dormant until the right conditions surface.
Yes, I agree. Okay.
Well, no, I think we'll have to, Heidi will have to let go of your theory. I think at some point of time we'll have to.
I didn't.
I'll give you the reason for that later. But WD had some. WD he was asking you what sport you played, but we already asked him. He was a gymnast in school. But Lisa had some interesting thing. Dad, can you have a look at the chat? Lisa had to leave, but she's.
Lisa said, well, thoughts growing up in the diverse culture among rapidly changing environment, modernization, how it influenced my capacity to be able to see another point of view. You know, I think that this would be the work of an anthropologist. I'm going to hazard a guess that it obviously influenced my worldview of how to perceive these things. But I think, you know, without being too clever about this, I must say that I grew up in a very Western-oriented culture environment. A lot of the movies I watched growing up were really American pop culture. And I listened to music that was American pop. And so, you know, in that kind of environment, I don't know if, you know, this mishmash of cultures actually played a role. But I think it would be a little bit like what sometimes people describe of the English-speaking Chinese. They call us bananas, you know, because we are yellow on the outside, but it's white on the inside. Does that make sense?
Okay. Now you have questions coming on for Chile. First from Chile. Jimena has something. Gilbert, you come later.
Okay.
Yeah. Hi, Tat. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And I want to ask you about that time that you bought some flowers for your mother. I have 2 questions of that. What did you expect? What reaction of your mother were you expecting? And if your siblings also, if they have done something like that, like a bunch of flowers or some gesture towards your mother, and what was the reaction of your mother towards them?
Wow. Yeah. First one, right? I think there were moments in my growing up where I've always desired the kind of outward pouring of, you know, emotions the kind of affection, love that I watched in the movies, which I never received. And maybe that moment for me, if I were to look back, but it's been so long and I hesitate because, your mind cannot possibly remember what it was like. But if I were to look back now and imagine that it may have been like this, I would probably give this answer that part of me was probably wanting validation from my mother, that if I presented to you a symbol of my affection for you, that I would get back from you a display of what it's like for a child to receive a mother's love. But I'm not sure whether I'm over putting this thought forward because, it's been so long. But I think that part of that is probably true, that growing up, that was pretty much absent from my environment. And it's so different to be able to grow up in an environment where you have the hugs and the kisses and the kind of thing. Because I know friends of mine who have grew up in a totally different environment, and I used to kind of envy the relationships they have with their parents because it seemed to me so much richer in terms of what they were experiencing versus my experience.
But tell me, Tat, now if you look at the relationship with your wife, are you able to then, obviously, all that you had pent up, are you displaying all that with her? Are you giving it all to her?
Did you say pent up, Vikram?
Pent up, yes.
I heard you say pent up, so I was thinking, I wonder whether it's still pent up.
Yes, I'm asking. Yeah, you have to tell us.
My wife, when I first met her and she met my family, she used to share in her quiet moments that sometimes she finds my side of the family somewhat dysfunctional. And I used to sort of believe that, well, that's partly true, but I would then say, well, everyone's family is kind of dysfunctional in their own way, isn't it? Because her family, although they were a lot more open with their display, she's got 3 siblings. She's the 4th. But the way they interacted with each other wasn't very uniform too, because they would have a family member who didn't live with them. One of their siblings lived outside the house and wasn't part of the family unit because for economic reasons in those days, sometimes you would have parents saying, well, to a trusted relative, would you help bring up my daughter or my son? And that sort of creates its own dynamics itself.
But tell me, now, did you buy her flowers? Did you buy your wife flowers? And how did she react? That is very important to find out.
How did my wife react?
React to you getting flowers for her? Did you get flowers for her?
Oh yeah. So so that was a much better outcome for sure. I used to do this until both of us, okay, so it wasn't just me, got bored with this ritual. So it would be like, first year I knew her, I'll get her a rose, and then when I discovered she loved tulips, I'll get her tulips. So 10th year would be 10, 20th year would be 20, and then after a while it would be like, actually when it becomes a ritual, that's when I feel it has to stop, because it loses its how would you put this? The significance of something that is when you don't look out for it, that to me is a richer thing. So once it became a ritual, we both agreed not necessary, especially Valentine's Day. I've never understood why Valentine's Day guys have to give ladies roses. But we went with this for a while until she decided, it's too expensive, because we're just getting ripped off on Valentine's Day buying roses that would have cost like 50 cents a stalk. On Valentine's Day, each stalk could cost you $10.
So basically, the Rose Promotion Council has done a good job all over the world.
Yeah.
But Adeyemi wanted to say something. Adeyemi, but I'll just come back to Adeyemi. Has raised her hand. You didn't raise your virtual hand, so you come in later. We have to raise your virtual hand.
Yes, I'm sorry I missed the part of the meeting because of some obligations, and you have again a very interesting.
Adeyemi, let me tell Tat. Adeyemi is in Croatia.
Okay.
I'm from Croatia.
Lovely. I've been there once.
Oh, and did you like it?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I was interested in how do when you look back to your professional career of a lawyer and now as a mediator, do you have any regrets that you haven't found out earlier about mediation concerning the effects of your lawyer's profession and the results, and now seeing the results of a mediation? How do you, if you make a parallel with that, how do you think about your lawyer's profession?
Tat, before you answer, I'll just tell you, because Adeyemi has just got into mediation, but she's also a lawyer. Adeyemi, you're a lawyer?
Yes.
And she got into mediation later? That's what you basically trying. There is some connection she's trying to make there.
Yeah, yeah.
No, my brief answer, as brief as I can make it, is no regrets. I think it would be tragic for one to live life, and looking back, feel that one could have embarked on a journey earlier, and it would have been richer. But no, I think it is what it is. I got into law school because I couldn't get into medical school. I kind of mucked up my A-level exams, and so when it came crunch time for applications, I just didn't make it. And so I actually got into law because my brother said, well, why don't you apply to law if you're not going to be a doctor? And that's what brought me to law. And then while in law, I mentioned the story of how I then became interested in mediation. And so it could have been earlier for sure, but I think the way it's panned out, I can only say I should be grateful for how that's panned out. So I'm not going to say that it's worth the while for me to look back and say, if only I had done this or that, I could have embarked on this journey earlier. Because what are regrets? What would that mean? It wouldn't mean anything, actually.
Also, what you picked up on the way while you were practicing and you were a litigator, I'm sure it's helped you now. I mean, everything helps as you go along.
And it still helps me because, again, I continue to practice as counsel. And it makes me, I feel, a more well-rounded person in the work I do.
And one more question.
Oh no, Adeyemi, you'll have to put on your video for that. You can't be. He thinks you're a bot. I mean, I have these bots lying around who ask questions.
It's not convenient for me today, but
no issue. No, problem. Come on.
Okay, but I would like to ask, when concerning your lawyer's profession, do you think that it still has some exclusive role in some kind of situations when mediation is not appropriate, but you think that your lawyer's role is something exclusive, that you can achieve something good with it?
What I'm understanding is, what if mediation is not appropriate? And I certainly agree that there are certain situations where mediation may not be appropriate. And in those cases, I think lawyers who understand how to problem solve would be of great help to the parties. Because lawyers, by virtue of their training and experience, are problem solvers and help parties to find solutions. But I would also put a caveat in there that it's very easy, I think, in the profession, at least in the common law profession that I belong to, for sometimes the business of law practice, of legal practice, to dominate the practice itself, that you're almost, by virtue of what happens habitually in your practice, so focused on time costs, your billing targets, and trying to make the business flow into the firm, as opposed to trying to help the party. So I think that's a piece that really has to be thought over in the business, in the practice that I'm in. But that's a subject of a different discussion.
No, what comes out from there was how important was and is money for you.
Well, okay.
Arjun, we are there only. You come back. We'll come back to you. Not a problem.
How important is money for me? Is that
was and is, because you talked about billing, so we have to talk about that aspect.
Well, are you going to pay me for this, Vikram?
That's what I'm asking you. No, I'm just assuming it's not important for you.
No, I think money is important. I mean, it would be, I think it would just be fallacious of me to say money is not important. I think money is important in putting you and your family through what you consider to be a lifestyle that you want them to have. But I think there is a threshold where it cannot be of that importance, because otherwise it drives your values and it drives your conduct.
I was thinking from your practice perspective, I mean, is billing that driving your practice, or is it other things?
No, I think they are both equally important. So there is a baseline. So it's not one size fits all, right? So there is a threshold where I expect my colleagues and I to meet on a recurring basis. But once that's met, I don't think that we are hung up about getting the like doubling revenues and getting the firm to a 20-man firm. That's, to me, at least for me, it's not important.
Adeyemi, can I go to Gilbert first and come back to you? Is that okay with you?
Okay, no problem. Thank you very
because
much.
Gilbert's been waiting for that. No,
yes,
we'll come
of
back.
course.
We'll come back to you. Yeah, Gilbert.
Okay.
Yeah, Gilbert.
Thank
you. Hello, Ted, for sharing. Thank you for sharing. I'm calling from Luxembourg. So I understood you have 3 children. So my question would be, would they explain to a third person what the father is doing in mediation? What is mediation? What is a mediation mindset? Is that an open theme in your house to speak about? Okay.
Yeah. So I can hear you with some distortion. My understanding is you're asking me, would I have reacted in certain ways in the home environment that shows my kids what a mediator how a mediator reacts to dispute resolution? Would that be correct?
Yes, just by understanding what the father is doing when he is mediating.
Yeah, sorry, go on. Sorry, I was listening out for you.
Yes, maybe my micro is not so good. So what the father is doing in mediation, they understand. They could explain it to somebody else.
Yeah, I think that's right, because so in the family, my children know me to be a person who would listen to them quietly without asking, without steering them into one way or the other. And I've had long conversations with, especially my 2 boys, when they encounter a problem and they want to suss me out for review. I'm also the person who they go to sometimes where they have certain concerns in their interactions with my wife, for example. And so by and large, I think I have, at least, from what I see, successfully, maybe is a bit too rich a word to use, but I'll just use it anyway, successfully being able to demonstrate and portray to my children that this is a good life skill to have. The traits that we all love as a mediator coming into a relationship, even as a family unit, is extremely important in allowing the family unit to continue through, the what would be the very common disputes that occur within the family growing up.
Because Dad, I'll give you a little background.
No,
background is this, that Gilbert and I, a group of us, has been discussing peer mediation. So we are very interested in having the children develop that culture of mediation. So I think it's coming from that background there.
Okay. I'm not sure whether they would sort of take the cue from what I've done, but I imagine that must be because I look at, children, they take the cue and they mirror how parents react, right? And I see some of that happening in my children, that when things are a bit shaking in the discussions and tempers are escalating, that someone would step to the forefront and try and de-escalate the situation.
Okay.
And some of it's a bit raw, but I see that happening, and I think it's encouragement. But the other thing I'll say to you, Gilbert, tongue in cheek, is that I think it also speaks volumes that none of my children are doing law. They decided that they should all be doctors. So maybe there's a piece in there that needs unpacking, but for another day.
Or they just want to show you, Tad, that they can get into medical school and you couldn't.
Oh yeah. Which is all well and good, right? Because I sure could do with 3 doctors growing older.
Yes, Adeyemi, please, you're back.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask regarding this earlier. As we all know, mediation is something when you can achieve results when both parties have goodwill for finding mutual interests and solving the problem that way. But in lawyer's profession, you have, as you said earlier, you have to take a side. And it is purposeful when some of the parties or both parties aren't of goodwill. So how do you switch from the role and the perspective of a mediator to a role of a fighting lawyer?
I think that's a very rich question. Although I think the part that needs a little bit more nuance is the fact that not all lawyers, or for that matter, litigation lawyers, need to be gladiators all the time. And you see the landscape developing in this way, that in Singapore and elsewhere, that in certain kinds of dispute, you are bringing to the forefront the lawyer's development of skill sets as a collaborative problem solver, as opposed to a litigator who's trying to accomplish an outcome by convincing the neutral in an adjudicatory process that your case theory is right and the other party's case theory is wrong. Right, so I'm thinking of, for example, in the family context, in Singapore, for the last 2 years, the family justice courts have put forward the notion, the principle that therapeutic justice is all important in family disputes, and lawyers who want to practice family law need to be able to embrace a different kind of advocacy, right, which is skewed in favor of a collaborative solutions-based, solutions-finding approach, as opposed to an adversarial approach where you're gunning for claiming value only for your client at the expense of the other party.
A serious thing. But one thing you said, mentioned about gladiator. Kathleen, what was that statement of yours, this gladiator statement? Can you just repeat it? She said something on her show. What was that?
Last week, I said lawyers are gladiators and mediators are conductors of the symphony.
Yeah, but if only the instruments would play as you want them to play, right, as a conductor.
That's the difference.
She makes them dance to a tune, so it's okay.
Wow.
She manages that.
I would love to appear before you, Kathleen.
Well, the clarity of a mediator, brings out that symphony of the parties across the table. That's the beauty of the clarity. It's interesting discussion, though. I find that lawyers that come in as gladiators, as a mediator, I just look at it as high value, which is a position as well. So it just needs to be unpacked. Yeah. It's interesting the place where they start to relax.
No, but Kathleen, you can tell him that you're not a lawyer. She's a non-lawyer.
I'm not a lawyer. No, I was a high school teacher for 23 years. And a mother that helped me be a great mediator.
No, and don't tell him anymore. Don't tell him anymore. He has to watch the episode on the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Yes,
it's so interesting, your life thus far and the journey that you've taken. And I don't know if this is the way for you as well, but my daughters actually said that I became a better mother after my mediation training.
What about you? Did you become a better father?
Wow. I feel that I need to go back and do some serious reflection now. Nobody's told me about something like that, so
I must have been really bad.
Well, either way, I could believe that maybe I've done a pretty decent job. So my becoming a mediator and sort of evolving that way has only validated, I think, my earlier approach to parenting, maybe.
No, but Dad, you've done a good job as a mediator or as a parent, because you haven't got the kids to answer. We cannot take your word for it.
Well, I'll have them sign a statutory declaration and send this to you. Vikram.
You must. We'll have to put it up on the show. The kids have endorsed what he said. Kapil, you were saying something, Kapil? You were asking something?
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Vikram. So, I'm very interested in this whole notion of data ethics and AI ethics. I know it's the new buzzword in at least technology lawyers, I'm a technology lawyer here in India. Now, ethics is now increasingly coming into a lot of our conversations, right? Concepts of fairness, accountability, and transparency. So my, what I'd like to understand from you is, there can be a code of conduct for mediators, but how are mediators coping to this new world of, the ethics and especially data ethics and ethical AI? Because we are all in a virtual world. All hearings are on Zoom. So, are you seeing those conversations happening where parties are saying, hey, and you have the red list of the IBA, conflict of interest, etc., which is more applicable to the arbitrators. But are you seeing parties saying, we want you to disclose conflicts up front? Just your views on that, Tat. Thank you.
Short answer to this question. Ever since the Singapore Convention came into being signed and ratified, you find that there's a lot of conversations going around now in many of the mediation institutions, especially on Article 5E and F, which deals with the mediator standards and conduct of mediation and conflict of interest. I think that because of what's visible to me, you are going to find that institutions like IMI, IBA, leading the charge on setting up working groups to discuss whether or not it would make sense to have a universal set of standards that might resonate with the mediation world. Something very similar in the IBA context to, the concept of the red, amber, and green light for
where is this going?
Conduct in the
you're not allowed to let people take you there. We're not going to get into all this. Kapil, what are you saying? We have to talk about Tat's life and you want to talk about Singapore Convention. What is wrong with you? Just because he's a friend and his old friend, you can see by no hair on his head, he's very old. But these old friends, they can get away with anything. You are not supposed to ask him about any such thing. But your old friend Kato, please, don't you have anything to ask? You got to know so much about that.
Right, Tat. One thing I haven't asked you is about religion. Right? Today we talked about family history, cultures, languages. We briefly talked about why you have chosen mission school because of your brother. You also mentioned that your father went to mission school. Right? Has religions, if it is a Christianity, been something of importance to you in your life, or is it going to play some significant to the role in your professional life as a mediator?
A very direct answer would be this. When I started this journey many years ago, a good friend of mine, whom you know, Teruo, Sing On, asked me, when he was still heading the Singapore Mediation Center, he asked, "What's this to you? Which part of you as a person is interested in this process of mediation?" And I didn't hesitate, because I told him, look, I accepted Christ when I was a child in primary school, and to me, Christianity is at the front, center, and back of my life. Going into doing the work I do, being a peacemaker is something which is so integral to my conduct, because of, and I don't want to get into this sort of conversation where I offend anyone, but in my faith and my value system, Jesus actually said to whoever is a Christian that, blessed are the peacemakers, for you'll be called sons of God. So to me, that was a shining light on why I needed to do the work that I do, so that as a workman, I can be approved when all of what I do comes to an end.
But right, this is a good, okay.
The faith is what makes, I think, the work that I do meaningful for me, because actually, apart from that, it would just be a secular situation where I'm I'm doing all of this just to bring food to the table. But to me, it's a lot.
No, but this is
more.
a good time, Tat, for me to promote my next series, which I'm starting from tomorrow, which is called Mediators, Mediation and Spirituality.
Sure.
Religion can be okay. We can discuss religion also, but we're looking at the larger spirituality thing. So Tat, you have to be there. Kato, you have to also be there. The link is that in the invitation. You have the link for tomorrow, but it is 7:30 p.m., not 5:30 p.m., but 7:30 p.m. It'll be an interesting discussion, Tat. It will be. It's going to be an interesting aspect of the mediators, because we last time we were discussing, Mr. Panchu was the one who had kind of discussed this, that we should talk about it.
Sure.
Because Adriana, sitting in Croatia, had the Gita with her. Gita is a religious book from India. So she had that. Mr. Panchu was obviously talking about it. Then we have someone from Brazil talking about the Gita. So suddenly we said there is a link there, maybe, in terms of spirituality being a common thread between mediators. So I thought that was really an interesting discussion. So I think we can take this up. But we also have who over there? Bob, you don't want to say anything with your...
If I can say something, I like to find out more from all the religions, but my religion is Christianity. So Bhagavad Gita is something I learn from some lectures, and I find the common standpoints in all religions.
Absolutely. That's what we're going to discuss tomorrow, Adeyemi. You're going to be there.
Yes.
We'll discuss this aspect. It's an interesting discussion. I mean, religion is one thing. I mean, the spirituality aspect of it and everything.
And what Tat said, Jesus was one of the greatest peacemakers.
Absolutely.
So this,
absolutely. No, I think that's what, look, I'll tell you what the problem, Adrian, is that the church is not funding me, is not sponsoring the show. So we will not be able to talk about it here. What do you mean, You have to tell the church to start funding this program, because that day Mr. Akisanya was also, he's a pastor. Mr. Akisanya is from Nigeria. I don't know, Tat, whether you saw that episode. He's a pastor there. So I was just telling him also that the church has to start sponsoring my show now. But Fernanda is in Brazil. Fernanda, anything from Brazil that you want to ask, Tat? Although she came in a little late, she had to leave. And Ekta definitely has something to say. Ekta is in India, but she also disappeared. But hi, Ekta. You want to do?
It must be getting late, Vikram.
Yeah. We'll ask this one thing that Ekta.
I couldn't unmute.
Yeah, that's okay. Now
I
didn't want you to
unmute.
No, I didn't let you unmute because you would speak too much, and then you would have no one else would get a chance. Yeah.
No, I have nothing right now to add. It's just that you have the two meetings. Last time's conversations were actually very interesting in terms of spirituality.
Yeah. Okay. So we take that up tomorrow then. Okay. Perfect. If you have nothing to say, that means the show is over. Tat is right. I think we'll have to end it here. Yes, Tat.
Awesome. So well, it just leaves me to thank you, Vikram, for this opportunity. It's really lovely to meet so many new folks here and to meet some really good old friends.
No, thank you very much, Tat, for doing this and taking out time. And we will definitely see you tomorrow. And Kato and Adriana and Ekta and all of us will be there tomorrow. Let's discuss that aspect then. That'll be an interesting link that we have to create between people. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for coming in.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Heidi, you don't have to leave if you don't want to.
Hey there, how are you?
Yes. Fernanda, you also don't have to leave. I was saying Fernanda, Ilan is there. Ilan, you don't have to leave. WD obviously is not leaving. WD, you're not leaving.
Hi, Vikram.
Hi, Ilan.
Hi.
You didn't have...
I was hiking.
Oh, not bad at all. So show us. You should have shown us those videos.
Where are you? Are you at Lake Como?
Yes, I was hiking, so I couldn't really put the camera on, but I was listening intently. I had the
you
phone
should have
to
put the
my
camera on. It would have been fascinating to see where you were.
Yeah, well, I can show you out the window here. There you go.
Wow.
Oh my goodness, so beautiful.
Where is this? This again, Como.
Yeah, it's a very small village called Nesso. Just stopped to try and get some food.
But show us that. Show us the outside again. It's nice to see that. Very nice.
Yeah, no one has masks on there. Well, you do.
Well, yeah, you're allowed to have your mask off if you're at the table.
You're allowed to have your mask on your chin. That's what it is.
But anyway, that was a really fantastic session, Vikram. Thanks so much. Yeah, that was great. So I can't come tomorrow. I'm doing my mediation workshop with the graduate students, but
That'd
I'll
be
watch
very
it
sad,
back.
Ilan. How will we go ahead without you? It'll be tough. I know that. How will we do it? That's something we'll have to figure out. But
thanks.
But Fernanda, you didn't have anything to tell us?
Oops, I think she's leaving.
I think maybe you could unmute. Maybe that happened.
Yeah, I was on mute.